Welcome to Journeys of Belonging to Blackness. Popular culture both reflects and inspires everyday life. The stories we tell, the incidents and events that are emphasized, the ideas and memories that are imprinted on our hearts, in our minds, and that fill our spirit. Perhaps these reflections not only show us what once was, but also the possibility of what is and what can be. For many African descendants in the Western Hemisphere, the origin story of their ancestors in the Americas are terse, if at all existing. The African-descended origin story is often framed in public discourse in highly problematic ways. For some, reliance on several popular narratives, such as Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs, 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup, and the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, may provide some help to fill in the knowledge gap by greatly detailing African descendants' experiences, including the crimes of enslavement, its brutality and resulting trauma, and the power and spirit of their resiliency in the U.S. context. Other narratives, such as Caribbean slave narratives, only serve to document everyday life across the Caribbean and in Brazil. These narratives shed realistic insight on how the enslaved lived, how they were treated and understood. Indeed, Caribbean narratives will often depict African descendants' direct connection to their African heritage and a clearer experience of Africa, since mortality rates among Africans were high. Not only did this mean that enslaved Africans were able to remember, recall, maintain, and rejuvenate African culture more readily in comparison to those enslaved in the United States. The design of the plantations in the Caribbean and throughout the Americas also allowed for them to hold on to their African heritage more easily, as they often lived on their own. For others, looking to motion pictures to African-descended origin story, overwhelmingly framed with racist stereotypes that reflect both prevailing sentiments and society's comfort level at the time, were only depicted as slaves and servants, people with no past, present, or future. The public's interest in African origins peaked in 1977 with the broadcast of television miniseries Roots. Based on Alex Haley's 1976 best-selling book Roots, The Saga of an American Family, the miniseries was groundbreaking. Roots marked the first time the public witnessed the horrific enslavement and treatment of Africans in the United States, portrayed in detail in a way to ultimately tell the story of African-descended resiliency. The success of the miniseries also led to the interest and establishment of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. But together, these narratives speak to the one aspect of African descendants living across the Americas, which was enslavement. These do not elucidate African descendant life and origins prior. And still, what are the current traditions and aspects of cultural life and identity that persist among African descendants, regardless of location, language, religion, and ability? Since the decoding of the human genome and new direct-to-consumer technologies over the last decade, there are scores of African descendants outside of the continent of Africa interested in learning their origin stories. That's not to say there aren't family griots or genealogists that exist within families doing this type of kin work, the documenting oral history, reconstructing family narratives, compiling family trees, and archiving photos and other keepsakes. Yet, for most African descendants outside of the continent, there remains the enigma of one's roots, especially as one considers those existential identity-based questions, such as, who am I? Where do I come from? Where do my peoples hail from? What is it in my past that can help me understand where I am going? It is in this knowledge that we are empowered to tell our own African-descended stories, the conditions of our past and present, and how these are the reasons for our future actions.